Mananiya Sri Advaniji, who for the last 3 decades have been some kind of a pole star for me, which I used to confess to him that after my mother, I always look up to Advaniji for personal clarity, and he is one of the pole stars of honesty and probity left in this country. And I am very happy that after 18 years, I have been called to address a BJP meeting. Advaniji called me to address a large number of Karyakartas and thinkers of BJP in Jinjoli in 1994. And after that, this is an opportunity which I have got to share my thoughts. And my friend Balbirji and dear brothers and sisters who are assembled here, the topic is globalization and Indian society. Obviously, Balbir knows where the drift of my study has been in the last 3 decades. That's why he has probably chosen the word Indian society rather than India. But before that, I am extremely happy that I have been called to address the first meeting of the Vivekananda Study Circle. My association with Swami Vivekananda has been my gateway to understanding India. I was in a village. I got educated in Tamil medium. And when I came to Madras city and joined the Vivekananda college, I could not understand one sentence of English. And the Vivekananda college monks took so much pity on me, coached me. In 3 months, they transformed me into not only a student who could understand English and a bright student, and afterwards I passed out in CA examinations with All India colors. That only gave me the academic distinction, but far more than that was Swami Vivekananda's total influence on my thinking. And that's what led me to RSS later. And I can understand this country better when I see this country, the society, our whole public life through the vision provided by Swami Vivekananda, which has also very largely influenced my thinking, which I will be presenting here. See, for a political party which is context bound, to take up a topic of this kind, which is a large text, is a combination which we rarely see. Every political party is interested in dealing with the day-to-day situation. But globalization as an economic, as a politico-economic phenomenon, what impact it will have on the Indian society is a very large issue which transcends all contexts. You cannot limit it to a context. In fact, it may not be fitted into a context. So, I am happy that the BJP is taking up an issue which is not unrelated to the context, but which transcends the context. But it is very important, because if a party were to look up on what its responsibility is in handling the society, the nation, the polity, and the institutions associated with it, the core understanding will have to be of what this society is. And if you look at globalization, which is about 2 decades old, and this came with like a tsunami in early 1990s, and everyone's mantra was globalization. And today, if there is any word which is practically absent in the global discourse, it is globalization. I don't think anyone very seriously talks about globalization today. People talk about global trade. People talk about global investment. People talk about global demand, global supply. But there is no discourse about globalization today, because in 20 years the world has got fatigued with the idea of globalization, because it was an undefined concept, ill-defined concept, poorly executed. It has produced enormously wrong results, not only for people who were not part of the decision making about globalization, but also people who decided about globalization. And 2008 has proved that the basis on which globalization was driven, the theories, the financial theories, the market theories, the theories about the relationship between the people and the society, the government and the people, have all proved to be wrong. In June 2010, the Economist magazine came out with a cover story on the state of the economic theories today. It said the economic theories expounded in the last 30 years, which incidentally produced globalization, are useless at best and positively harmful at worst. All the theories for which Nobel Prizes were given were found to be not only faulty, but they were also found to be harmful, like what is known as the Black-Scholes theory, about which I will make a mention in the course of a presentation. When the tsunami of globalization struck India, and we had no intellectual wherewithal or basic groundwork to understand what its impact is going to be on us, there was no literature, there was no counter opinion building. It was a complete mass defection from the socialist pursuit to the market pursuit. And some of us who did not agree with it didn't know how to stop and make the people think that this may not be the right way. So we started traveling across the country, and all that I am going to share with you today is the empirical knowledge which all of us gathered as to what happens in Ludhiana, Batala, Rajkot, Jamnagar, Morbi, right down to Thuthukudi. We visited about 42 industrial clusters in a period of about 5 to 6 years and found that the assumptions on which policies are being decided, the economic discourse that is taking place in this country, have nothing to do with the productive energies of India. And I will give you a small example. All of us are very educated. We think about the country, we are concerned about the country. But how many of us know which is the place which has the highest per capita income in India? It is not Bombay, it's not Delhi, it's not Calcutta, it is not Chennai, it is not Bangalore, it's not Hyderabad. It is a small place called Morbi in Gujarat, where people make the Ajanta wall clock. It's a small community. And you go, you can't talk to anybody in English because nobody will understand English. When I was talking to the Rajkot Industries Association chairman, we talked till 2 o'clock in the morning from about 9 o'clock in the evening. The only common word in English which we could understand was the word Baroda. He knew nothing about English, but they have set up such a powerful industrial establishment. And it opened my eyes. It is not done by universities. They produced universities. It is not engineering colleges that set up this kind of development model, but they set up engineering colleges. Take Coimbatore, for instance. It is industry which set up educational institutions and not vice versa. So this gave me a totally different perspective that what is happening in this country is not reflected in the economic discourse of India. And it is with this perspective I am going to share with you what is my understanding of the Indian society and what we, the intellectuals of India, the academics of India, the educational institutions of India, and I would partly put the blame on the political class of India who have not traced the economic history of India. I will share my experience in the IIT Bombay, where in 2010 they had invited me to share platform with Mr. Adi Godrej. And he was to speak first and I was to speak later. It was a very, very tough program. Research scholars, students, academics, all were there. And he spoke brilliantly for an hour, in which the quintessence of his thought was that India has been a great civilization. It knew philosophy, it knew spirituality, it knew how to coexist with differing thoughts. But the one area where it has been a thorough failure was economics. And we started putting up economic performance only after globalization came in. Otherwise, we had only what is known as the Hindu rate of growth. You know, the entire audience clapped. And he was given a roaring reception. And I had gone with a particular mindset to speak, and I had gone with certain points. I kept aside all the points because I was surprised that in such an institution of such high learning, which is going to brand India, which is going to represent India as a rising intellectual giant, IITs, IIMs, I was surprised at the kind of ignorance about India. So I decided to keep aside the notes which I had taken and began talking on what is the current Western understanding about the Indian economic performance. You know, our mind about India was made by scholars who never visited India, who never dealt with Indians, who never read any Indian literature. Take two persons, for instance, Karl Marx. In the year 1853, before he wrote the Das Kapital in 1857, Karl Marx wrote a couple of articles actually on 25th June 1853. In the New York Herald Tribune, he wrote two articles in which he traced what his understanding about India was. He said it is a very peculiar country. It's one country, no doubt. And it has some kind of a centralized living model. And it is infrastructure and the mobility of the people are looked after by king who somehow function together. But economically, if you look at that country, every village is an economic unit. It is a tariff unit. And it doesn't import or export anything. It produces and consumes. The producer is also the consumer is also the producer, which he later on called the Asiatic method of production. He said it's a very peculiar country. And there is no economic inequality because no one has any power over others. This was called primitive socialism in the communist terminology even today. But he said there is something very wrong with this society. They are worshipping monkeys. They are worshipping cows. And such a backward society can never progress and carry out a revolution which is necessary for advancement of the human race. It is necessary to destroy the social base, the society. And that work the British is doing, even though it is a very painful destruction, it is a pleasurable destruction also. This is what Karl Marx said. You know, the man never came to India, he never read in Indian literature, he never met any Indian and spoken about India, but he wrote about India, and you know, he became one of the most powerful thinkers influencing the Indian intellectual establishment, political establishment, sociology, and economic thinking. And our academics are still under the grip of this powerful thought that India is semi-barbaric. This is what he classified India as. And then another person, Max Weber, less known but a more powerful social thinker, he was the man who aligned economics and sociology. He wrote a book called Sociology of Economics, which defined why the Protestant societies are coming up and Catholic societies are lagging behind. And he said that Protestant societies, because they release a person from the control of the church and from the control of the hierarchy, it opens a person to individualism, entrepreneurship, enterprise, and so they are more fitted to handle capitalism. And he predicted in early 1900 that America would become an economic power only because of the Protestant ethic. He was absolutely right. As for the Christendom, the relative values of capitalism with Protestant Christianity and Catholic Christianity. And he is one of the most powerful and influential thinkers of the sociological and economic establishments and academics all over the world today. And there are researches which show that these two thinkers influenced Indian establishment more than any other intellectuals. And I would have been very happy if Max Weber had stopped writing with only his understanding about Europe and America. But he wrote a book in 1925 which was not published till 1950. That was about the religion of Hinduism and Buddhism, in which he said two societies can never come up. That is China and India, because they believe in karma and rebirth, which is anti-enterprise, anti-entrepreneurial development, and so these two nations can never come up. You know, researchers after researchers have confirmed that Indian political, sociological, economic and political establishments have been powerfully influenced by these two thinkers. And afterwards, Kenneth Galbraith came here, a great friend of Pandit Nehru, and he said, I can't understand, India is a functioning anarchy. That it is an anarchic society, but surprisingly it is functioning also. And we quoted all this. We defined ourselves through Karl Marx, through Max Weber, through Galbraith, and came Professor Raj Krishna. He was asked why India is growing so slowly. He said it is Hindu rate of growth. This was 1978. That's how we defined India. India was defined by people who had nothing to do with India, nothing to do with understanding the Indian society or Indian civilization. And a remarkable U-turn took place in the world about which no one has cared to understand. That in 1970s, when Japan began rising as an economic power, the West was surprised. Because economic development, economic progress is supposed to be the preserve of the West. How could Japan, from Asia, an underdeveloped place, a place which is condemned not to develop, a Buddhist country, how could it develop? And so one Paul Bayrock, a Belgian economist, made a thorough study of the economic development of different nations from 1750 to 1918. And he came out with a surprising finding that in 1750, if you draw the economic development statistics of the world, it would look like this. China, 32.8% share in global GDP. China was the top country in 1750 with 33% of world GDP. India second with 25% of world GDP. UK, one of the last with 1.8% of the world GDP. America with 0.1% of world's GDP. He said these are the structure of the world economy in 1750. And India went down from 24.5 in 1750 to 20 in 1800, 17 in 1830, 8 in 1880, 1.7 in 1900. In just 150 years, the Indian economy, the Indian polity, the Indian society, the Indian civilization crashed. And the same thing happened to China. From 33% in 1750, China became 6% in 1900. And in the same period, UK and US, which had just 2% between them in 1750, their share went up to 41% in 1900. This completely transformed, paradigm shifted, transferred the power, economic power, political power, cultural power, civilizational power from Asia to the West. When Paul Bayrock came up with this theory, the West was stunned. It is very likely that in the middle of the 19th century, the average standard of living in Europe was a bit lower than the standard of living of the rest of the people in the world. This shook the West. The West was always superior. How is it that the Western researchers have shown that Asia was a mighty economic giant and India was an economic giant? And so this job was given. Even London Economist noted it in 1990. Then Angus Madison, the greatest economic historian ever, he was given the responsibility by the OECD countries to test and verify whether Paul Bayrock's research was correct or not. It was not a single man's research. They instituted what is known as a Development Studies Institute. All the 20 countries funded it, and he was given a fleet of research scholars to work with. And Angus Madison started his work like this. If Bayrock is right, then much more of the backwardness of the third world, that is Asia, presumably has to be explained by colonial exploitation, and much less of Europe's advantage can be due to scientific precocity, continued slow accumulation of wealth, and organizational financial superiority. You cannot say it happened, our growth happened because of this. It has to be with colonial exploitation. This is how Angus Madison started the work and said that Paul Byro cannot be correct. And Angus Madison came out with the final conclusion in the year 2001. Until June 2010, Angus Madison kept on publishing his researches, in which he said he drew a 2000-year economic history of the world, starting from the first year of the common era called AD. He said, if you look at the economic statistics in the year 2000, in the year 1 of the common era, India tops the world with 34% of world GDP, China next. In the year 1000, if you draw the economic statistics, India still leads with 28%. In the year 1400, India again leads. In the year 1500, India again leads. In the year 1600, China overtakes India. In the year 1700, India overtakes China. And Angus Madison came to the conclusion that Indian economic crash occurred essentially and wholly because of colonial exploitation. When I mentioned this to the IIT students, scholars, researchers, academics, they were stunned. No one knew. And Adi Gandrij was also there. It's all available on the YouTube. You can see both the lectures. And after I completed the lecture, and of course I said more, which I will say here, and all of them came and surrounded. Sir, you don't stop with giving this lecture. We want you to run a course for us. And I ran a course for them in the first quarter of this year. I took 21-hour course for the entire MBA students, in which many research scholars, academics also participated. Why I am mentioning this is that the tallest educational institution of India had no understanding of Indian economic history, which is now proved. Actually, if you want to look at the Angus Madison's work, he is known as World Economic History, a Millennial Perspective. It is available on the internet of OECD even today. You know what is OECD countries? It is 26 richest countries in the world, and its statistics are most trusted and relied upon. It is that OECD forum which has declared this as the most authentic economic history of the world. The benefit of this study, Karl Marx did not have. The benefit of this study, Max Weber did not have. The benefit of this study, Galbraith did not have, nor Mr. Professor Raj Krishna. But still, day before yesterday, I see articles being written about the Hindu rate of growth. You can understand the divergence between the truth and the myth. The myth about India, which has settled in our mind, has made us debrand India, devalue the Indian society, and all the problems of India we attribute to the Indian society. Take, for instance, just the gender phenomena. That Indians kill their girl children. All of us accept it. But from 1901, statistics is available. In 1901, the gender ratio of India was 972 to 1000. It was the highest in the world at that time, 1901. The world average is even today 960. 972 to 1000 was the first Indian census calculation of gender ratio. In 1951, it became 946. In 1991, it became 927. In 2011 only, it has moved up to in 2011, it has become 940. Now you look up to what is the gender ratio in villages and towns. In rural areas, the gender ratio is 947. In urban areas, 926. Is traditional India caring for women or modern India caring for women? And if you look at the metropolitan area, it is still less. But we blame traditional India, traditional Indian society, traditional Indian belief systems. These statistics stare at our face. But in the public discourse, nobody asks this question. How do you blame traditional India for gender deterioration in this country? It's traditional India which is still preserving it actually. And I can go on repeating as to how the Indian society has been holding on, but I don't want to travel more into it except as a side. In 1994, in 1990s, when we started to say that globalization is not going to be the answer for Indian economic problems, that India has its own social moorings, it has its philosophy, it has its sociology, and after all, there is a link between sociology and philosophy. There is a link between philosophy and the way people live, lifestyle, and lifestyle is related to habits. Habits are related to what a person needs or doesn't need. And so there is an integral relationship between philosophy and actual life. And this is not integrated into the study of economics in the West. And so globalization is not going to deliver what it is promising to deliver or what it is being canvassed as being capable of delivering. And the word society is absent in the Western discourse. Margaret Thatcher said in 1971, there is nothing called a society. And all that the West has accepted today is civil society. You know, civil society and our understanding of society are totally different. Civil society is a club. Our society is a tradition. And our society is an open air university. It is our society which has produced Ramgadiya community, which has built Ludhiana, Batala, Jalandhar. You must go to those places and see. And how a community of artisans have built India into the largest spare parts supplier for the cycle industry all over the world. It was not done by any engineering college. Take Surat for instance, where 15 years ago people used to come and dirty the city from the nearby villages. Lakhs of people used to come. There was no water. They used to come with their cattle. The whole area would turn into open air lavatory. And it became a law and order problem. The government could not control it because the people there, no way they would have survived in village. But when they came, in 15 years, they learnt diamond cutting. Today, Saurashtra is the largest diamond cutting factory of the world. 9 out of 10 diamonds cut in the world are cut in Saurashtra. And because of that, we not only took up diamond manufacturing, 2/3 of the global diamond trade which was in the hands of the Jews, $25 billion diamond trade, $16 billion is in the hands of the Gujaratis today. No university accomplished it. No government planning did it. It is the social relationship between the people. You can never create that relationship. You can destroy that relationship. You know, a society which is integrally related by relationship is the society. Civil society is a society by contract. There is a huge difference between a relation-based society and a society based on contract. A civil society is a product of what is known as social contract theory, which is the basis on which all constitutions are founded, including our constitution, in which everybody is related to each other as co-citizens of a country and no other relationship is recognized. That is why in Philadelphia in America, a son could go and file a writ and say he must be divorced from his father because there is no relationship between father and son except as co-citizens, and the court granted it. You can understand that in the total Western sense of understanding of an individual, which is known as methodological individualism, on which the sociology of the West, on which the economics of the West, on which the constitutional theories of the West are founded, does not recognize normal human relationship. And our society functions entirely on human relationships. In fact, contract make a small interlude only in the corporate sector, and that too backed by very powerful relationship. There is contract. Contract is not what drives India. Relationship is what drives India. And I will give you a couple of examples as to how it works. You know, in 1992, Mr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister at that time. He invited Dr. Jagdish Bhagwati, who was the person who framed the entire WTO Dunkel Treaty. And he was called the god of free trade. And Jagdish Bhagwati was also regarded as the guru of Paul Krugman, who said, only because of my guru I have got Nobel Prize now, in the year 2008. Jagdish Bhagwati himself was not a Nobel laureate, but he was a great economist. And when he came to India, Dr. Manmohan Singh asked him, we are in a mess. How are we to come up? Please tell us some way. He said that the problem with India is, the Indians are saving more than what they need. You are saving 23% of your GDP, and your families are saving 19%. Somehow you bring down the savings of the families from 19% to 10%. And 9% of the savings, when it becomes consumption, when people buy more goods, there will be more production, there will be more employment. And he built a whole theory based on that. And he said, unless you destroy family savings and bring it down by half, there is no way you can develop. And for which he said the biggest problem of India are the Indian women, who are very miserly, and you must teach them how to spend. For which he said you must build huge malls, bring attractive goods from outside, and see that they are moved out of their reservations and they become consumers instead of being reserved family women. You know, this is a serious advice given by him, a 72-page advice which used to be in the website of the Finance Ministry till about 2 years ago. I don't know why they removed it. The government began doing it. But fortunately, this consumerist economics, which was the thrust of the economic reforms at that time, the media was happy, it was getting huge advertisements, and the advertising agencies were happy, and choreographers were happy, songs were there about how to buy the goods and all that, and our women sang the songs, never bought the goods. I will tell you what is the consequence of it. You know, our savings to GDP ratio in 1991 was 23%. It became 37% in the year 2009. It is now sustained at 34%. You know, this is what transformed India. It is not FDI. The total FDI that has come into India in the last 20 years, 1991 to 2011, is just 1.8%. That is the savings investment gap in this country. So Shankaracharya, who was the economic advisor to the government of India in the year 2011, he wrote an article in Business Standard that we don't need money from abroad for our development. And we were told in the year, you know, in 1990 it used to be told that we need $400 billion for infrastructure development. No infrastructure development in India can take place without foreign investment. And we need here foreign investment. And foreign investment became the drive for all our reforms, and we equated economic reform with foreign investment. I am going to read out to you a research work done by Goldman Sachs. Global Economic Paper number 187. Goldman Sachs says, it is not that India needs only $400 billion for infrastructure. Somebody said India requires $620 billion. He said that's also not correct. India requires $1.7 trillion for infrastructure development in the next 10 years. This paper is 2010 October, Global Economic Paper number 187 of Goldman Sachs, which is available on the internet. It says infrastructure development of 1.7 trillion in the next year, considerably higher than the previous estimates. And you know what they say? For this, India will not need even $1 from outside. I am going to read out 2 paragraphs from the report. The main channel of funding for infrastructure currently is household savings, intermediated through the financial sector to the government, which then spends on infra. An excessive reliance, you see what other countries have done, what India has not done, and how that has made a difference between boom and bust. An excessive reliance on government spending or external financing can lead to boom and bust. The experience of other countries funding infrastructure needs suggests that a sustainable model is to build on healthy balance sheets and a reliance on domestic savings channeled through long-term funds such as insurance and pension funds. And it says, what will be the character of the Indian savings for the next 20 years? It says, bank deposits will be 48%, insurance 14%, pension PF 14%, government dues 14%, 11%, shares just 6%. 55% of the American economy is hooked to stock market. Only 6% of Indian savings will get into stock market. But we value Indian stock market like Americans value Dow Jones. See what an amount of economic distortion in our thinking, in our understanding about India. And unless the Indian society has this propensity to save, this propensity to save is related to the responsibility of the people about the family, about the society, about their standing, about the values which they inherit. All this constitutes the propensity to save. This propensity to save was destroyed in the West. The families got destroyed. Today, 51% of the American families are single-parent families. 41% of the children born are born for unwed mothers. 20% of them are born for school-going children. 51% of the American families are dependent on government support. It has become a government-dependent society. What was a family-dependent society has become a government-dependent society. The father looks to the government for taking care of him, not to the son. The unemployed son looks to the government to take care of him and not to the father. So they destroyed the relationship and built a contract-based, rule-based, constitutional society, which has resulted in what is known as a time bomb ticking under the American economy. The unfunded social obligations, social security obligations of America is $104 trillion, whereas their GDP is only $16 trillion. This is the biggest and the most powerful dynamite under the American economy. But in India, this entire thing is looked after by the society, by the family, based on a cultural inheritance. In fact, I don't know whether Advaniji remembers or not. In the year 2002, one Kumar Bhattacharya had come to Advaniji's house. And we were discussing, Kumar told me, Guru, you are opposing privatization. You should not be opposing privatization. I said, I don't oppose all privatization. Of course, Himachal Pradesh government runs autos and taxis. They should be privatized. But there is no necessity to privatize railways in this country. Railways in India transports the whole of Australia in one day. You can't privatize it. So when we were discussing, I asked Kumar Bhattacharya a question. Which is the biggest public burden of the government in the West? He said social security. I asked him, can it ever be privatized in the West? When Mr. Clinton became the President of America, he appointed Hillary Clinton as a committee to go into privatization of social security in 1990, particularly health security. They came to the conclusion you have to privatize it. They also came to the conclusion you cannot privatize it, because to privatize social security you need families. You cannot create families by law. By a government order you cannot create families. It's not my saying. This is what Francis Fukuyama said. You can build an army, you can build a bank, you can build a cadre of employees. You cannot build families. They are built by culture. But the government can destroy families by its law. That's what they have done. And so privatization of social security is an impossibility in the West. So I asked Kumar, don't you think social security is privatized in this country? He said, Guru, if this one point is articulated by the Indian economists, Indian policymakers, Indian media, Indian leaders, in any part of the world, the balance sheet of the government of India will be more bankable than the balance sheet of any other country in the world. That is the power of the society. The society takes this burden. It's not only in India, in Japan. You know, in Japan, one of the things that the US economists used to talk about Japan is that your financial system is the worst because you are bank-based. We are market based, that is stock market based. And till 2008, Japan was keeping quiet. In the year 2009, they gave the answer. The Bank of Japan carried one line reply in the website. The world financial systems are in distress. Japan is safe. You know what was the answer? I am going to read out to you, very important. This is what paper number 149, May 2009, Bank of International Settlement website. The Japanese Bank of Japan officials wrote, why do Japanese prefer bank deposits over risky financial assets when all financial instruments are well developed and traded in Japan, unlike in other Asian markets? The most complicated financial instruments are traded in Japan, not by Japanese. The Japanese go to savings bank account. Only 9% of the Japanese savings go to the stock market. You know why? Family. In Germany, only 7% of the families are investing in stock market. In India, only 3% of the savings get into stock market. It means what? That wherever there is family orientation, wherever there is relationship, the society takes care of much of what the government is called upon to do in the West, the Anglo-Saxon West. But today we are thinking of bringing foreign investment in pension fund. We must study Germany, we must study France, Italy, Spain, Japan. In none of these countries they allow equity in pension. It is all in bank. German runs one of the most successful bank-run pension systems in the world. But we are looking only to America. And there the pension fund have been invested in stock market. And when the stock market comes down, the pension values come down. The Standard and Poor 500 companies today have a $512 billion hole in their pension account because of the stock market fall. But nobody studies here. It is because you don't understand the Indian society. Our savings habit is related to our culture, our way of life, our obligations, which is formed by relationship. The husband and wife relationships have been transformed into contracts. The maintenance of children have become subject of contracts. But how do you bring in, import that kind of economics into India? It's a mighty issue. So I am triggering all of you to think. Because there's a 30-year study of comparative culture-based economics, which I am trying to share with you in 40-45 minutes. It's not such an easy task. But one thing I want to trigger all of you to think is that the economic model which we are following is not global economic model, because the globe has other models also. But we are so skewed. Our education, our training, our English training, our love for the Western countries, particularly America, and the deep influence the American funding agencies have over our think tanks, our media, that makes us look at only one area, and that is proving to be a disastrous failure today. The American model is failing in America. The state and municipal pension funds have a $4 trillion deficit. Their health insurance is supposed to go bankrupt in 2019. Their social security, retirement benefit is supposed to go bankrupt in 2033. They are hoping for a miracle. We are looking at that system. We are not looking at Germany, which is the only country having budget surplus year after year. No other government is having in the world. We are not looking at them. We are not studying them. So my feeling is there is a fraternal, society-based, family-based economies in the world with which we share commonality. And our idea should be to have a wider understanding of the world with whom we relate culturally, socially, in filial models, and our economic model will be aligned to them. This enormous amount of work has to be undertaken by a mighty organization. It has to be undertaken by someone who can acquire power, who can change the thinking of the people by exercise of that power. And that responsibility, according to me, is on the Bharatiya Janata Party. And my appeal is that there has to be a constantly functioning think tank. It need not have to meet. It can be an electronic network where people put in their thoughts, but the only thing is people must read. Unfortunately, reading habit has gone down so tremendously in the last 1 decade or so. People don't even read 10 pages if you give it to another person. And the single qualification for admission into the think tank is everybody must read. And if we can develop some 150 thinkers throughout the country, link them through electronic medium, bring them together, share their thoughts, we must become intellectual stormtroopers to present an idea that is essentially Indian. India is one of the most powerful and rising economies in which the family balance sheets are good, bank balance sheets are good, only the government balance sheet is poor. I will conclude my speech with what is the reigning economic models in the world. One is market driven, another state driven, third bank driven. State driven model has failed, that is a communist model. Equity driven model, the market driven model is failing. The only model which has been able to sustain is the bank driven model, which is of Germany, which is of France, Italy, Spain, most of the Asian countries, almost all the Asian countries, including South Korea and India. So we need to go for bank driven model and not market driven model, which is now called the reform. We have to reassess the very meaning of reform, which has undergone a change after 2008, and our job is very big. It is not very complex once you understand India, and I am happy that for such a serious and tough subject, you gave me such a patient hearing. Thank you very much.